All right, good evening. Welcome back to another week of a midweek mock draft. And we actually just got a notification just a few minutes ago that the Packers actually signed an offensive tackle, and that's former Titans offensive tackle Andre Dillard, 6'5", 315 pounds, a 6-year player out of Washington State. Spent some time, was a former first-round pick of the Philadelphia Eagles, and then 4 years with them, and then moved on to the Titans. So interesting news that we have a tackle signing. Um, I have yet to look much into Andre Dillard, to be honest. Just wanted to spread the news that if you're watching now and you hadn't heard yet, we did just make a signing. So we'll keep that in mind as we get into this week's midweek mock. I've got it queued up over here in PFF. We're going to look at what fell in order for us to get to where we are with our first pick here. And one thing that I'm interested in based on how this goes is the potential of moving up from 41 to address another need early in that second round. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. So we're going to go take a look at who has gone before 25 here. And we got Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Brock Bowers, Malik Neighbors, Joe Alt, Marvin Harrison Jr., Talisa Fuanga, Quinyon Mitchell, J.C. Latham, Byron Murphy, J.J. McCarthy to the Broncos, which is big need for them. Terrion Arnold to the Raiders, also a need for corner for them. Olu Fashanu at 14 to the Saints. Dallas Turner to the Colts, pardon me. Troy Fatanu, Nate Wiggins. Rome Odunze falls all the way to 18 in this mock. Then we've got Graham Barton going at 19. Cooper DeJean at 20. Two big-time Packers, mock players there. Latu Latu falls all the way to 21. Brian Thomas Jr. at 22 to the Eagles. Bo Nix to the Vikings at 23, so they get their quarterback. And then A.D. Mitchell at 24 to the Cowboys. So that puts us at 25, and we'll take a look at who's available in case you weren't able to follow that. The big one that really I think would be too good for Goot to pass up on is Jared Verse here. Guy that's been projected at times to go, early teens. You see his average draft position is 19th, but the edge out of Florida State, and he is a faster prospect, a little bit smaller than what we typically have at the edge position, but that would be exactly why I think the Packers would be intrigued by him here. 6'4", 260, so still good size, not in the 250s like Kingsley and Agbare, and a little bit more twitched up than him as well. And the bottom line here, it says, Verse doesn't have the longest arms, and that shows up in some pass rush counters and in tackling, but he brings his hard hat and lunch pail to every snap, wins with strength regularly, and is built like a first rounder. And some of the tape, if you haven't seen the player prospect profile, you could see some of what he was able to do against Graham Barton. I think Graham Barton held up pretty well against him, but there was a few reps where, Verse just overpowered him, or he was able to get, quick around the edge and really put Barton to work in some of that. So if you haven't seen that player profile, go ahead and check it out on my channel. But we're going to go ahead and take Jared Verse here. Interesting that we would have, another year where we take an edge in the first round, but premium position. And for a guy like Verse to fall all the way to 25 here, I think this would be too much for Goody to pass up on. So as I said, I want to actually kind of pause it here. Got through the rest of the first round. We see JPJ went, Johnny Newton, Amaris Mims, Kool-Aid McKinstry went at 29, and that's who I would have actually liked to try to get early in that second up, trading up here. We got Chob Robinson, Peyton Wilson, and Tyler Guyton. But I was thinking we might be able to get Kool-Aid McKinstry somewhere in 34, 35 kind of range, and move up to get that corner that we would covet there. But I guess we'll just go ahead and let this thing ride all the way to 41 and see what our options are from there. So we got our edge rusher. Still would like to address corner and offensive tackle. So I'm going to start offensive tackle here. Went to him a bunch of different times. Kingsley Suamatea. I think he is absolutely a Packers type. It would be nice if we had the agility testing for him, because that's kind of a bit of a question mark, honestly. But but I think ultimately you look at him, young guy to 21, just barely 21 years old. And the fact that we wouldn't need him to start right away would give him the opportunity to take a year to grow behind Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom, unless they decide that, Suamatea is ready to go. They could then plug him in in theory, move Tom to center, I guess. I don't know. We'll see. Let's take a look at the corner position here as well. We see Mike Sanderson, TJ Tampa, interesting guys. I think there's some value that we could potentially get a little bit later. And I mean, you see the average draft position for Max Melton, who I would love to pick. Um, he's been going way earlier than 71 in the simulations I've done so far. But I'm going to go back to tackle here, and I'm going to go with Kingsley Suamate because, as much as it might be that kind of chalk pick, I think that's a realistic opportunity for the Packers to take there at 41. We see Jonathan Brooks has been going earlier and earlier in a lot of these mocks, and you see Max Melton just went up at 52 to the Rams. So definitely rising up. I remember earlier in the draft process, he was going, in the 90s or late 80s. So seeing him rise up, that's great for him. I honestly think, he deserves it, but it's one of those things where it's right in between that range of where the Packers pick. And it could be an interesting spot that, maybe we look at targeting, maybe not. So we've gotten our tackle, we got an edge, and now let's look back at cornerback. And some people have talked a lot about Kyrie Jackson, and this is the part that kind of concerns me a little bit, is that his grades, on very little playing time, mind you, were not great the previous 2 years. He had a nice season this past season, 9 forced incompletions, 1 dropped interception, had 3 interceptions in their own as well. So if you take that upside, I mean, typically, I don't think the Packers would go for that because they do like to typically see 2 years of production from their guys. So interesting prospect there. We've talked about Jarius Jones and Renardo Green a couple different times. Let's see what we have. Linebacker is usually where I'd like to go at 58 because it's going to get thin quick here. And Edgerrin Cooper has often been the pick, but this time, because I want to do something a little bit different, I'm going to look elsewhere and look maybe defensive interior. Brandon Dorless is an interesting guy. Pretty consistent grades throughout his career in Oregon. But yeah, I don't know. A little bit undersized for what we'd probably want on that interior. You want a little bit more of a run stuffer. I would have loved to see Chris Jenkins fall down here, but went a little bit earlier than that. So I guess we'll look at safety at this spot because Jaden Hicks has been a guy that's been talked about a fair amount as well. And for some people, he is their number one safety in the draft, assuming you don't count Cooper DeJean as a safety. But it says, Hicks is well-built, strong safety who can play at all 3 levels of the field. He's a tone-setting tackler and has starting potential in 2 safety systems, especially as a strong safety robber over the middle, which I think would pair really nicely with Xavier McKinney. In reality, because Xavier McKinney is so well-rounded and so versatile, anybody for the most part can kind of fill in wherever their strengths are, and then you can play Xavier McKinney to whatever their weakness is. But I think this would be an interesting pick for the Packers here. So we're going to go Jaden Hicks, safety from Washington State at 58. Let's go ahead and kick this thing up a little bit faster now that we're kind of getting in here. We are doing 7 rounds today, which only one that we're doing at 7 rounds because it is a lengthy and time-consuming process. But I would like to kind of get some familiarity with those late round guys for you to kind of see as we get through this thing. If you guys have thoughts along the way, by the way, if you're watching this live, go ahead and leave the thoughts in the comments. I mean, if you're watching the replay, go ahead and leave them as well. I'd love to hear from you. But here at 88, let's take a look. So we've gotten, to recap, we went Jared Verse at edge at 25. He fell all the way to us there. Then we went Kingsley Suamate at 41. And then at 58, we went Jaden Hicks, the safety from Washington State. So let's take a look. Still got Kyrie Jackson here at cornerback at 74. Interesting. Interesting to see him fall this far. At 88 rather. Um, let's see. Um, haven't gotten defensive interior, and I think this is definitely a spot where we'd see Michael Holt Jr. potentially. But I also want to look at a guy that we've probably gone through and mocked a number of times now, but um, Dominic Puny, who I think is an absolute Packers type. Um, compared to some of the guys that are in that same kind of range, he's a little bit younger than them too, but has a lot of playing experience and then that versatility where he has played tackle, but I think would actually kick in and play guard. You see, while he was at Kansas for some time, he played left guard and left tackle, so got that versatility there. And right in that range of where they like their size to be, 6'5", 320, basically checks both the blocks on height and weight. Um, and then on top of that, he was one of those guys that ran the short shuttle in essentially what calculates to be like an elite time. So very good athlete, movement skills there, and would be value depth on the interior of that offensive line, but have that versatility to kick out if they needed to. So we're going to go Dominic Puny here. You're probably sick of hearing about Dominic Puny with all these different mocks, but compared to a guy, Mason McCormick's another guy that's highly athletic, really high up, like 98th ish percentile RAS score, I believe. 6'5", 315 in that same vein of the size that they like, but he's over a year, like almost a year and a half older than Puny. And I don't recall exactly what his short shuttle time was, but looking at those prospects, that is something that the Green Bay Packers like to address, is getting some younger prospects where they've got more of a runway before they're going to hit their physical prime, really, so they can really develop them and work them into their system. So 91, we didn't see Michael Hall Jr. go, so that's a possibility here. Let's look at linebacker. Nobody really in this range. I mean, Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is interesting, but a little bit undersized. 6 foot 230 on the light side for sure, and wasn't as athletic at that size as like Peyton Wilson is, who's taller but weighs in that same kind of range. So you'd like to have seen that from him, but the big thing for him is he's incredibly smart. Obviously has that pedigree both from his family, but then also playing at a big school like Clemson. So I wouldn't completely rule it out, but I just think this is still early for him, and doesn't check all the boxes for the Packers. So we're going to just go and run with it here on defensive interior. Michael Hall Jr. tested outstandingly. Top 30 visit for the Packers. It says Hall's measurables make him a tough player to slot into a specific scheme, but due to how quickly he can win with finesse on the interior, his best spot in the league is likely defensive tackle or defensive end in a versatile 4-3 front, which we're expecting to see from Jeff Hafley. That size that we talk about, 6'2", 280 pounds. Again, young prospect here, 20.8 years old, so not quite 21 years old. And I wouldn't be surprised if with that, through that top 30 visit, as we heard recently that Jaden Reed, when he visited with the Packers, they asked him if he could play or if he could get up to 195. From his lesser weight at the combine. And he said, yeah, I can do that. And he did, and played at 195 for the Packers last year. I wouldn't be surprised if a similar thing happened with a guy like Michael Hall, who has that athleticism. And if you're looking for him to be a little bit bigger, you can sacrifice maybe a little bit of that explosiveness by adding like 15, 20 pounds to make him a more stout run defender potentially on the interior. So I think Michael Hall Jr., another guy that would absolutely be a Packers type, and we'll take him off the board here at 91. So next up, we'll be at 126, and got some interesting options here that I've been kind of looking at. So, if we looked at safety again, we've got guys usually like Cole Bishop's around here. Got a couple of linebackers that I think would be interesting. Cedric Gray, we've taken a couple times. Trevin Wallace, I think is a really good prospect there as well. And then this is where you might start looking at running back as well. You see Braylon Allen's here. And then Tanner Bortolini is another guy on the interior for this offense that I think the Packers would be really interested in. I've been seeing him go before we get up at pick 169. So if we were going to take him, I think this is kind of the spot where we need to see him go off the board. I've actually heard, watching some other shows, listening to some people that, the league is a lot higher on Tanner Bortolini. I think it was actually Go Long with Ty Dunn, where, God, I can't remember the dude's name, but he had wrote basically that, a lot of the league sees him as a top, I believe it was like 50 or 60 players. They're really looking at like a round two guy in Tanner Bortolini, but the draft industrial complex has had him in the fourth so much, so can't really tell for sure where he's going to go. I wouldn't be surprised if, the third round is kind of that sweet landing spot. So interesting to see there. Again, just to recap, we've gone through, got Jared Verse at edge in the first. We got Suamatea in the second at pick 41. Then we got at 58, we got, what's the safety's name? Now I can't come up with it. Jaden Hicks, Washington State, from Jaden Hicks. Then we got, at 88, we picked Dominic Puny. And then we had Michael Hall Jr. At 91. Trying to keep track here. They don't really do you a solid by keeping your order for you. So apologies for the little delay there. But here we are. So we've got, edge, tackle, safety, another tackle that projects more as a guard probably, and then defensive tackle. So we haven't addressed that linebacker position. So this is a spot where I think we're going to have to look at linebacker. And I talked about, Trevin Wallace, linebacker from Kentucky. He's been going earlier than this average draft position. Don't let that fool you. And then Cedric Gray, who's been going in this kind of range between our two picks. So at this spot, I think the interesting thing would be maybe we take a look at trading back and see who's interested. So we see 148 and 166 are options. What could we get if we traded back with the Raiders? So let's look at the Rich Hill. Well, that's unfortunate. We happened to lose everything there. My Chrome crashed. So here we are. I guess kind of look at where we had. So, we got through basically pick 91. Just to recap for everybody: Jared Verse, Kingsley Suamatea at 41, Jaden Hicks at 58, Dominic Puny at 88, and Michael Hall Jr. at 91. I apologize for the fact that this all went down. That's very unfortunate. But thanks for sticking in there with me. And maybe we'll do another one of these that hopefully doesn't get interrupted by this sometime between now and the draft. This was going to be the last midweek mock draft, but maybe we'll do a mock draft Monday live next week and kind of go over that. So stay tuned to the channel. Subscribe to the video, subscribe to the channel rather. And I'll make sure to push it out there on the community tab that we're going to go live again and what the details are for that. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.